maybe you want to share with us a little bit. What's going forward? What are your priorities? What are you focusing on, and how we can best collaborate going forward?
Many thanks, Jürgen, and many thanks to the bank. We collaborate a lot with you and with Keith, of course. But let me explain briefly what we are doing. So for us, there are 4 key pillars in what we are doing in losses. One is data, big data, because we need to understand what is the number and where it is. We need to understand what means losses. People used to confuse, and we have developed the food loss index, which looks at losses from post-harvest up to wholesale included, and waste from retail to consumer, so that we can really target where is the problem. And we're using artificial intelligence to identify where in the value chains by commodities the most common patterns, so that we can come up with solutions to those problems. The second thing is technology. So technology is central because there are ways to do things, but technology has to be looking to the context and the location, and it has to be specific. So for example, a farmer that is working in maize in Zimbabwe, or is working in maize in Tanzania, we can give them the technology of the plastic hermetic bags. But if they don't have the drying technology at the same time, they will put the grain with too much humidity that will increase the level of aflatoxins. And that will even worsen the problem. So we need to look at it into the context and how we resolve. And honestly speaking, there is very little technologies for drying for small holders. Most of it is designed for large and medium holders. So there is a huge innovation that we need to do there. And that's where we need to identify the solutions. But not only that, we need to understand also what innovations are needed, what we need to innovate. And innovations are both on technology, but also on how we do things. For example, what we found in Guatemala and Honduras with beans, we found that normally, if you compare, what normally happens is that the government gives packages of seeds and fertilizers. In most of the cases, the fertilizers are not what the soil needs to be able to minimize and increase productivity. And the seeds, sometimes they will never arrive on time. So the farmers won't be able to resolve the problem. But when we tested providing to them incentives, what you were saying, telling them where there was a market, but explaining them what were the standards they need to achieve to be able to go to that market without giving any package. So comparing the package of the government with something where we just provide information and market access to this smallholder of beans, we found that this worked better. The farmer figured out where to find the proper inputs. The farmer figured out how to comply with the standards, but he was getting the price premium. And that's what the guy working in Mozambique on maize and making an effort to improve the way they work, drying their maize to be aflatoxin-free, doesn't get incentive in the market. Because he goes with his grain aflatoxin-free, and somebody else goes with his grain, which is not aflatoxin-free, and as you know, aflatoxins, you cannot observe them. Then what happens? They get the same price. So why I will do the effort? So if we want to create really the change in the location, in the field, we need to provide the proper incentive. So we're working on that, and that's the governance component. So it's innovation and governance, technology and data. Now, how we are moving forward? We also need to identify what works and what has worked, and very quickly. And that's where we work with the private sector and we, of course, with the bank, because what we can do is create catalytic investments. We have very little funding, as you know. We can create catalytic investments of the change, but you guys, as the bank, have the strong arm to scale up and to replicate things. And that's where I think cooperation with the IFIs is central for us, because it will give us solutions. And this is extremely important right now. We are right now in a pretty tight situation because we want to see what is happening because of COVID-19. As you know, we are going into a deep recession. Most of the exports of developing countries are to the developed countries, to the Netherlands, to Europe, to the US. The exports of high-value commodities, of high-end, like mangoes, like fruits of high-end, will be significantly reduced. And these producers, they cannot sell in the local market because the price is too low. So for them, it's a problem. So a mango producer in Peru, which produces a caliper and a size and a color of mango for the UK, won't be able to export anymore a proportion of what they used to export. And this will be left in the field. And that will be huge losses and huge complexity. So we need to find ways in which we can also expand the value chain, giving them alternatives. And that's where we are working with the bank and with the Rabobank, for example, to set up these storage facilities, cooling facilities in Africa, where we can give the farmer more resilience, but not only giving the facilities so that they have a bigger life of the produce, so until they can sell when the market is better, but also linking those facilities with technologies of information, with internet, to the financial system. So warehouse receipt systems, which are electronic and can assure that you increase access to market. So many things that we are doing to try to accelerate the process. We are bringing the joint platform, the technical platform for food loss and waste that started in the Turkish G20. We have relaunched it, and we are trying to bring all the best practices there. And we hope we can increase our partnerships with the private sector, the IFIs to keep working on this. Thank you.
There was another question from Steve Walker Duncan who asked, how can we convince government bodies and regulators to level the playing field for local food supply systems so that they're able to compete with large multinational agro-businesses? Massimo, do you want to come in on that?
No, only to say that people normally believe that global value chains are not inclusive, and that's not necessarily correct. So global value chains is when a product crosses three boundaries, no? three countries, for example, or it can be within a country if it's a big country like Nigeria. The important thing is that small is beautiful. Smallholders can differentiate products. And that's an advantage, because if you're able to differentiate your product and comply with the attributes that is needed, then you can get a lot of benefits and you can make it inclusive. As it was said, you need to release constraints, and finance is one of the constraints, and contract farming helps do that. But we have to innovate more on contract farming, because you don't want the contractor to be the one who lends. You want the contractor to link you to the financial system so that you get a credit history and you can be a credit person for the bank. And that requires sometimes little de-risking, and that's where governments can play a role. Because you can have some de-risking initially, and we have done experiments where we show that initial de-risking increases enormously the access to finance of a smallholder, because then the banks learn how to score the risk of these farmers. So we need to find innovative solutions, and sometimes the solutions are pretty simple.